Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Surya Pastricha and in this video I'm going to talk to Peter Vranes, who's the co-founder and co-CEO of Nutromics, an Australian medical technology company revolutionizing healthcare through real-time molecular monitoring. In this video, Peter talks about his journey as a chemical engineer to commercializing several skincare brands across 1500 plus retailers and how he eventually raised $10 million in funding for his company Nutromics. We also talk a lot about smart wearable technologies, fundraising, and how revolutionizing healthcare can eventually bring people closer so that we all can live in a much calmer and a much safer world. There's a lot of knowledge and inspiration, not just about startups and healthcare, but also about life skills, managing people, networking, and a lot more for you in this one. So if you're new to the channel, please do consider subscribing and do watch and like this video till the very end. Now without any further ado, let's just jump straight in and hear out from Peter. Welcome to the podcast, Peter. Thank you so much for joining us. It is really a pleasure hosting you today. How are you doing?
Really good, Surya. Nice to meet you and looking forward to having a chat with you.
I want to start the podcast by telling you that I'm absolutely a big fan of the work you guys are doing at Nutromics, especially since over the past year we have, seen a unfortunate surge of health issues amongst people. And I believe that you're taking that very momentous step to change and revolutionize healthcare for people for the good. So Peter, why don't we start with you telling us a bit about Nutromics, your inspiration behind it, and how you got started with the same?
Yeah, sure. So I am the co-founder, co-CEO of Nutromics, together with Hitesh Mehta, who is also co-founder, co-CEO. And we started the company because we had a shared passion for solving a big problem in healthcare. And it really relates around lifestyle-related chronic diseases. This is a scourge of our modern society. To give you an idea, what we're talking about are things like diabetes, type 2 diabetes, cardiovascular disease, issues like that. And to give you an idea of the scale, like in America, 1 in 2 adults are either diabetic or pre-diabetic. That's a massive number, and that problem is getting bigger. And the surprising thing is that we are not talking about it more as a society, because not only is it devastating lives, but it's also costing the healthcare system a huge amount of money that it can't sustain. So I'll give you an example of what happens now when someone is diagnosed as pre-diabetic. So that is the number one indicator that they're going to get diabetes. And with diabetes, you have a small window of opportunity to rectify the path that they're on prior to becoming diabetes. Because once you're diabetic, it's much, much harder to reverse the diabetes once you've got it. And typically you're on medication for the rest of your life, and you've got issues around vascular issues, you've got a big increased chance of amputations and a shorter life, basically. So what happens now is that if someone's diagnosed as pre-diabetic, basically they're told to eat less and exercise more, which is does no one any good, because everyone knows that. So and then they're told just to come back when they've got diabetes and then we'll treat it. So that's a situation that we don't think is acceptable. So that's my daughter. We're in lockdown, so these things happen now. And so we have a device that can measure any molecular target continuously and in real time. It's a patch. And what that allows us to do is to be able to identify, help people identify when they are pre-diabetic, for example, and also help them change their lifestyle behaviors. Because if you can measure, say, glucose continuously and in real time, you can then do things like personalize a person's diet, which has a dramatic impact upon their metabolic health and their chances of getting diabetes. So that's where we started off. And as you know, with startups, there's always lots of changes and pivots along the way. And where we've ended up, that vision of a world where people can move off the path to lifestyle-related chronic disease is still on our path, but we have a more urgent and immediate need, and that is therapeutic drug monitoring. So people today are dying because they get dosed with drugs that where they get a toxic dose and they get things like an acute kidney injury. So we made the decision that's where we're going to start because that's more of an acute need. But where we're going to end up is a consumer product where we are empowering the consumer to take charge of their own health. So I'm kind of giving you the first step and the last step, and there's multiple steps in between. But that's a little bit about where we started and where we want to end up.
Yeah, that is a really remarkable journey you have had, especially because of your background in chemical engineering and commercializing several natural skincare brands across several thousand retailers in Australia. So what were some of the challenges you faced while building your old company, and what are some of the learnings from there which you essentially have been able to apply while building Nutromics?
Yeah, it's a good question. So I'm a founder of a medical device company, but didn't come from that area. I came from skincare, and I've been an entrepreneur for 17 years. And surprisingly, there are actually a lot of transferable skills. So running a company, a skincare company, we took an idea. I founded that company, had an idea. We built the brand, built the product, commercialized it, put it in the market, and then sold it in the end to a larger company. And so I went full circle. And you learn a lot of really important skills on how to build teams, how to commercialize, how to look at business models, how to solve problems in companies, how to raise capital, how to bring teams together internally and externally. And so all of those skills, I apply now to Nutromics. So that's kind of allowed us, in a very short period of time. We're only about 3.5 years old. We've raised $10 million in our time. We've got a real world-class elite team. We work with some huge multinationals that are keen on what we do. So I don't think we could have probably done that perhaps without the learnings from the last 17 years, through that journey. So yeah, so it's been really kind of very important, I think. And likewise with Hitesh, my co-founder, he's had experiences at IBM, Watson Health, and he's applied those learnings to what we've done, and we've really benefited hugely because of that too.
I feel that most of the times when people hear the word health tech these days, they intuitively start, thinking about fitness bands and trackers. And also recently, there has been a massive boom in the health tech market across various countries. And here in India, we have certain companies from the health tech space making it to the coveted $1 billion valuation mark. So I really want to know your opinion about the fascinating world of healthcare and health tech startups. Are we in some sort of way going to witness the next great revolution when it comes to the better access to healthcare? And what more is there to health tech apart from those fitness bands and trackers?
Yeah, good question. COVID is a curse and a benefit, right? It's a curse because millions of people have died, and it's a benefit though because it's created a renewed focus on health technology. The ability for the world to bring vaccines to a global market as quickly as they've done has shown what we can do when we need to move fast, right? We can do remarkable things. And healthcare has that promise that we are not, this is not a financial product that making rich people richer. This is what we do is help save lives, help improve people's lives. That's ultimately what we do as an industry. And so the two big changes that have occurred recently has been remote patient monitoring. So people can't get into hospital, or people don't want to go into hospital because it's risky. So pushing healthcare outside the four walls of the hospital has been a big trend. So telehealth has been a big part of that. But to do that, you need remote patient monitoring as well. So if you're going to treat people or assess them remotely, you need tools and technologies to do that. What we have is a digitally connected device. It's a patch, and you can put that patch on an individual, and a clinician can be sitting in their office and see real time various molecular targets on that patient who may be on the other side of the world away. They don't need to be geographically located close to them. So that's been a great thing. A great thing has happened in the last 1 to 2 years. Is that in terms of fitness trackers and those sorts of things, to date, you'd have to say most of it has been more entertainment than medical value. And that's because we're looking at physical parameters, right? That can be measured: heart rate variability, steps, things like that. Now, there's only so much information you can glean from that from that data, right? And we've had those things measured for quite a while now, to be honest. What we're talking about is a quantum leap beyond that. This is the evolution of that, because what we can do is molecular monitoring. So it's the equivalent of going and getting a blood test once a minute every day of your life, right? Now, you're not practically going to do that, but imagine if you had a device that was what we call lab on the skin. So our technology effectively replaces the lab and puts it on a person's skin in a patch. That's what it does. And so that radically changes the insights you can get from that information, that data. That's very different to heart rate variability when you got molecular targets. So you can look at things like cortisol and insulin and triglycerides and glucose and drugs and early biomarkers for disease states, so that when patients come in, clinicians have a much better understanding. Or things that move quickly, like sepsis, one of the biggest killers in the world. It takes a long time for clinicians to diagnose and treat that disease. That's why so many people die. The ability to get biomarkers quickly, molecular biomarkers quickly, is vital to being able to treat that disease and save millions of lives, literally. So this is the transformative nature of this technology, is that when you can do that, you change the way that people are treated, diagnosed, and that has huge implications on our healthcare system.
I mean, that's a really great thing you're doing at Nutromics. And now let's move on to some interesting questions about your venture.
Sure.
So, Peter, can you walk us through the Nutromics platform and maybe help us understand how the product works at the core level? And also, if you could demystify the core functionality of the platform, as well as tell us a bit about real-time molecular monitoring and how it can be truly life-changing.
Yeah, sure. So the patch is composed of two parts. One is a microneedle array, right? And what that is tiny little needles, less than 1 millimeter. They're pain-free because when you apply them on the skin, they don't actually hit the nerve endings, so they're pain-free. But what they do is they give us access to what's called interstitial fluid. So in our skin, we have all this fluid called interstitial fluid. It bathes all the skin cells, essentially. And we have 3 times as much interstitial fluid, or ISF we call it for short, than blood. So we have a lot of this ISF, right? And the analytes that we're interested in blood correlate really well in blood and in ISF, right? So typically you see good correlation between the two. So if you're familiar with continuous glucose monitors, I'm not sure if you're familiar with that technology, but maybe many of your listeners are. That's a new technology for diabetics, type 1 diabetics typically, that allows them, instead of pricking their finger all the time, they wear a patch with a little needle and it measures their glucose continuously, right? So they use ISF too. That's what's called their matrix, right, or their biofluid. So we use the same one. And on the end of those little microneedles is our second technology. This is the thing that's most important. This is called an aptamer sensor platform. And essentially what that is a platform sensing technology that has been shown to be agnostic to the target. And what that means is that it's a platform, so it can measure any molecular target continuously and in real time because it's a platform technology. So the holy grail in biosensing has always been a platform technology that can measure anything, because everyone in the industry has seen what continuous glucose monitors have done, right? So they're a $4 billion technology. And then spawn companies like Dexcom that are a $38 billion company off the back of their CGM, right? So we're talking huge numbers here, right? So the next question obviously is if you can get that sort of value from glucose, imagine what you could do if you had a platform that can measure any molecular target. Obviously, there is huge scope because you can solve dozens of problems in healthcare if you could do that. So the industry is full of engineers and chemists like me, and we get trained in a certain way. And no one has been able to solve this problem, right, of developing a platform technology. And it wasn't until a professor from UCSB, Santa Barbara, in the US, Professor Kevin Plaxco, came onto the scene and looked at this problem. He's one of the world's leading biosensor experts. And he's a biological physicist, right? So he looks at things a little bit differently. And he asked a fundamentally different question. He said, how does biology solve this problem? Because right now, you and I, we have these sensors in our body that continuously and in real time monitors various molecular targets. So this is a solved evolutionary problem, right? And he just said, how does the body do it? And the way the body does it is that we have these proteins that change shape in the presence of a particular target. And that was his light bulb moment. So, but instead of using proteins, you use these synthetic DNA aptamers, basically, because they're easier to work with, to do effectively the same thing. And so together with his lab, we've shown that 12 different targets can work on body with this technology. So we know that the technology works because everyone's technology, biosensing technology, works on a lab bench, and about 99% of them fail when you put it on a body because there's noise, there's biofouling. We've shown 12 times that this technology works on body, 12 different sensors. So we know the technology works. We've got a fully integrated working prototype, and now we're about to go to our own on-body trials on humans with our first target, which is vancomycin.
So is there any kind of application-based platform on your mobile phones where the patients or the users can track all the molecular targets which you are providing them to measure?
Yeah, we will do. So our fully integrated working prototype has Bluetooth that goes to a phone, right? So I already have that. That's not the challenging bit. The challenging bit is just getting the data to show that it works on a human in a ICU cohort. So in sick patients, that it works. So we're going to have that soon, that data. And where we're heading with this is on one patch, we'll start off with one sensor that does vancomycin, but then we're going to move eventually to a patch that can do 12 to 15 sensors. And we're going to be streaming all the most valuable molecular data that clinicians need, and they will get that continuously and in real time.
So basically, from what I understand, the healthcare experts can, maybe use this data to better treat their patients.
Maybe I should explain. So how I mentioned vancomycin, but I haven't explained what that is and what the problem is, right? So vancomycin is a antibiotic drug that is given to about 1 in 5 patients in US hospitals. So it's the most common IV antibiotic administered in the US. So that's a huge number. There's about 6.3 million people every year that get vancomycin. And it's a drug that's really challenging to dose, right? So you're using it. So what happens, a clinician would give it to you if you've got a bacterial infection and they're not sure, if it's a gram-positive bacterial infection, they'll give you vancomycin and that'll kill that infection, right? So the infection can kill you and they need to act fast. But the problem is that this drug has what's called a narrow therapeutic window. So the clinician's trying to get you into this therapeutic zone, this concentration of vancomycin in your body that's going to kill that bacteria. But it's really hard because they don't know how you're going to metabolize that drug, right? because there's a whole range of things. There's body mass that affects it. There's your kidney functions that affect it. There's and they don't know all this, right? So what they're going to do is they're going to give you the drug, and then 12 hours later, they're going to take a blood draw, and they're going to try and use that information to estimate your next dose. So in 36 hours, you typically get about 3 blood draws, right? And the result is so poor that 60% of doses are not in the therapeutic range. So imagine you've got this life-threatening bacteria that could kill you, and 60% of your doses are not even treating it whatsoever. But it gets worse because 10 to 20% of patients get a toxic dose, often leading to an acute kidney injury, which is one of the top 10 killers in hospital. So you go in with one problem and you now come out with another problem, right? So, and to give you an idea, your listeners, what an acute kidney injury means, it's the equivalent of a heart attack, but for your kidney. So you imagine when you have a heart attack, the damage it does to your heart, it's like that, but for your kidneys, right? So we're talking a serious event here. And it's expensive for the hospitals because every time a patient has an acute kidney injury, it costs a hospital on average $20,000 more. So this is really challenging, right? And so there's new guidelines that came out that said this way of dosing is not acceptable. 83% of hospitals in the US still dose this same way because they have no viable alternative. So our solution would be, instead of 3 data points over 36 hours, the clinicians get 1 data point a minute. They get continuous and real-time levels of this vancomycin concentration. So their ability to keep a patient in the therapeutic zone and outside the toxic zone is greatly enhanced. So that'll save lives, it'll reduce the costs, and it'll get people out of hospital much faster.
Wow, that's a really revolutionary thing which you are building out at Nutromics, and you also recently got into the MedTech Innovator Accelerator program, which is like the Harvard of the health tech startups, and is in fact the world's largest accelerator for life sciences companies, which is truly an exceptional feat, and for sure well deserved for the efforts you have put out to build Nutromics. So can you tell us a bit about it, and what do you think about the entire healthcare entrepreneurial ecosystem right now, from your experience at Nutromics in terms of the challenges and the fundraising aspect?
Yeah, so that's a great program, and I'd recommend it for any entrepreneurs in medtech to do it. Our time is always stretched, and do we want to do another program is always the question, because there's so many out there. And we actually initially thought, no, we won't do it. But we changed our mind on it, and I'm really glad we did, because it's a really great program. Like, it is the #1 program for a reason. It's given us great exposure. There's been 1,100. There were 1,100 applicants, and we're down to the final 20, I think it is. So it puts you on the radar screen of investors straight away. So we get a lot more inbound VC inquiries from that. We get there's some of the best suppliers, corporates out there. We get access to them. So it is well worth the time, in my opinion, for any entrepreneur in medtech to go for this, because if you can get in, it's worth it. You mentioned fundraising, some of the challenges. That's always the biggest one. The best advice, we've raised $10 million in a relatively short period of time, so in about 3.5 years. We did that because we focused on it. We are always in capital raising mode, right? The only thing that changes is the intensity. So we just closed a round, but last week we've had multiple VC meetings already. So we're always talking to VCs, always. Whether it's new VCs that we haven't yet spoken to, or whether we're taking, some of the marquee medtech VCs on our journey, we need to be talking to them on a fairly regular basis. Every time we hit a milestone, we're talking to them, right? So they need to know. The last thing you want to do is go in cold. They don't know you and say, hey, we want you to give us $5 million. You don't know us, but let me tell you everything about us. That's the last thing you want. You want to be talking to these guys 6 months before, or at least before you want to be truly opening up a round, so they get to know you. They can see you can execute on your plans. We do a monthly newsletter to all our investors and potential investors, and we call it the good, the bad, and the ugly. And we are brutally transparent, right? We say, here's what we're going to do. And we go, we did this one, we didn't do that one. We didn't do that one because of these reasons. We're going to get better at that. These are the things we learned. And that's why, no investor, you put yourself in their shoes, they don't want a filtered view of a company. They want the real view of the company. Just give it to me straight. And it's scary for an entrepreneur to do that because you think, if they see the true company, maybe they're not going to like certain things. You lose a lot more of them if you hide the bad things. Just show them the whole thing, right? These guys are savvy enough to know, to look under the hood and know it's not all roses there, right? There's going to be things that are good, but there's going to be things that aren't great. So you got to build trust a lot faster if you can just be brutally honest and transparent. And if someone doesn't like it, that's okay, because before they invest, they're going to find out these things anyway, right? Better to find it out early. But you're going to find more that you want to set yourself apart by doing that than 90% of companies that would just never have the courage to do that, because it takes courage to do it. So that's my best advice. Always be in capital raising mode and be brutally transparent, and don't give up ever. Just keep going. You're going to get no. If your vision is strong enough, right? Our vision is a world of zero preventable deaths due to a lack of timely molecular patient data, right? That's not just a nice vision statement. We make decisions in our company based on that. That's our driver. We have a moral imperative to get our product to the market because we know it's going to save lives. So when we have tough days, that's what gets us through. And you need something like that. You need what is your why or your pull, or what is it that's going to get you through and get your team through and get you to attract the best people in the world that you can find. You need all those things. So yeah, you got to kind of be a bit of a dog with a bone with this and just keep going, never give up.
Yeah, that's really valuable and insightful advice. And I was, recently reading this book called The 21 Lessons from the 21st Century, wherein the author talks about the proliferation of technology and how it is going to take healthcare to a new level. Health technologies have really, piqued my interest a lot since childhood, since I have grown up in a family of doctors myself and have many a times got the opportunity to witness the eye-based healthcare technologies right in front of me. So what do you think about your venture moving forward, since we are living in this data and tech-driven world, and what according to you would fundamentally change in the way you operate at Nutromics, especially from a product standpoint?
Yeah, look, if you look at macro trends, right, and you look at industries, healthcare and education are the two big dinosaurs in our world today, right? They're a century ago almost, like we have got so little innovation. And I know it sounds like there's a lot of innovation in MedTech, but in healthcare as a general rule, it's pretty archaic. Healthcare is pretty archaic when you really look beneath the surface, right? Now that means there's an opportunity when that happens, right? When you have big macro trends that cost trillions of dollars to economies, there is a pretty strong driver for innovation and change, right? And when you look at the big companies like Google and Amazon, they are looking for markets like these because they need to get shareholder growth and value, right? They are looking for the big ticket item industries where they can have seismic changes and ride huge waves, right? So healthcare is one of those that we're in, and you can see the big players like Amazon, Google, they are all moving, Apple, they're all moving into this space, right? In particular, they're moving into remote patient monitoring, right? There's lots of movement in that space with these big, huge companies, right? So that's a good thing. That's a good thing because that's a market that's going to be moving quickly in the next few years. So we think we are well positioned to ride that wave. And we have defendable technology with good IP to protect our position on that one as well. So moving forward, that we think from a macro point of view, we're in a good position. We can save money for hospitals straight away because they have very archaic ways of doing things that they admit themselves that are very costly, and we can save them money and we can improve patient outcomes. So we can tick a lot of those boxes immediately. But where we think ultimately this is going to go is going to be precision medicine. And it's a term that we hear, everyone's heard precision medicine, but what does it mean? For what we do, the idea that we have one-size-fits-all dosing regimes is archaic, and it always has been. We have, the artificial pancreas is a classic example of a closed-loop system. That's where precision medicine is going to go, closed-loop systems. So what unlocked the artificial pancreas was continuous monitoring of glucose. Unless you could do continuous monitoring of glucose, you can't have an artificial pancreas because you need that information to then know what level of insulin needs to be dosed. That's how it works. So the first step in all closed loop systems is monitoring. The second is the therapeutic. So we have the monitoring part because we can monitor any molecular target continuously in real time. So these drugs that we're talking about, which now looks like that, if you look at the concentration, it's all over the place, right? When you look at a closed loop system, which we've done this with vancomycin, a closed loop. So we monitor vancomycin and dose it automatically in a patient. You get that. So you get optimal dosing of a patient continuously, as opposed to this, heading into the toxic zone, heading down into the ineffective zone. You can stay in the therapeutic zone and sit it there with precision medicine. And you can personalize that dose to an individual. That's where we're heading. That's where we need to head, because that's where far superior outcomes for patients come. That's where you're not giving 10 to 20% of patients toxic doses. That's where you're not having all the costs associated with not being able to dose a drug efficaciously and safely. And that's where we can actually have drugs that are quite toxic but effective, and we can be a companion product for those drugs, and we can get great outcomes because we can actually dose those drugs safely, because we're not ever getting into the toxic zone, because we've got precision in terms of how we dose that drug. So we can get better outcomes for drugs. So that's where I'm trying to give you the macro and then the more micro level, but that's where I think this industry is going to go, and that's the role we can play in that.
That's really great. And now let's move on towards the topic of building and growing a health tech startup, especially in these tough times. So I'm really curious to know about your strategic thought process while you just started out and went on to explore new areas for the growth of your venture, and how did you essentially operate and manage a team in these tough times?
Yeah, it's challenging. As I said before we started this recording, so we're in Melbourne. We're in lockdown number 6. So we're trying to build a technology remotely. We're all scattered around the Melbourne, and we're trying to build it. It just adds a lot of complexity and challenges, but it's outside our circle of influence, so we don't worry about it too much. We just do our best with what cards we're dealt, right? So I think the first challenge is really having a compelling vision, right? Whatever you're doing, it needs to be compelling. If you got to question, is it worth your time, right? So it's got to be a bold, audacious, compelling vision. Number one. Number two, you got to be very good at collaboration and bringing people on the journey with you. So we've got some of the world's best people in their specific field from all over the world that have come to Melbourne that are working with us now. And we reap the reward of that every day, because when you get a team of elite people, that's where the magic happens, right? 90% of your problems are created or solved based on the quality of the team that you put together. So, and then you got to have a great culture, right? Because you bring elite people into a dysfunctional culture and they quickly become dysfunctional or they leave. So you got to get great at building a great culture as well. And that takes time and it takes experience to do that. But when you can get those ingredients together, you have a great vision, you got great technology, because that's you got to have that. You got a really strong team, and you have an ability to attract people all around the world to your vision and to your team. This becomes like a snowball, right? You get this snowball effect where at the start it's harder because you don't have all the other elite people in your team, and so it's challenging. It takes longer. But once you've got more capital, you got more elite people, you use that to attract more capital and more elite people, because you go, look what we've got. We've been able to attract X amount of funds, and then things change, right? Initially, we were really kind of working hard to get meetings with VCs and all that sort of stuff. And now that we've just closed the round, we find that more and more VCs are approaching us, and they're saying, "Can we come into the round?" And we're saying, "Sorry, we've closed the round." And they're saying, "Oh, when's your next round going to be? Can we get in on the next round?" And the conversation changes, right? So it's one of those things where you get the fundamentals right from the start, and you do get it. There is a snowball effect, and you see these companies that have huge momentum. That's, in my view, how it's created, from this, having those fundamentals right, executing well. And if you do that, you will get really, significant momentum that you can ride that wave.
Yeah, I mean, startings are always really hard, and once start getting that traction, it's really valuable for getting those inbound leads, like you talked about. Right now, you're getting VC calls, and that's really valuable for a lot of startups, especially yours. And also, Peter, we generally ask our guests to leave us and our listeners with some suggestions or parting advice. So would you like to share any words of wisdom, especially for the future entrepreneurs and health tech enthusiasts, and what would they be? Also, if you could share some book recommendations for our listeners.
Yeah, sure. My advice, so for anyone who's thinking about getting into starting their own business, I have a philosophy that we typically regret the things we don't do rather than the things we do, right? And there is going to be, you will challenge yourself in so many ways when you do this. And that is the greatest gift that you can have, right? Because when you challenge yourself, you're going to grow as a human. Now, whether your startup is successful or not, you're not going to know that, right? There's no guarantees in this game. The one thing you do take out of it is that you'll be a better person at the end of it, right? And you'll be a better person because you faced your fears, that you took on the challenge and you did your best. And at the end of the day, you will gain confidence and skills that almost I can't imagine a better way of fast tracking confidence and skill than starting your own. Because there is no hiding in this game, right? You're going to be talking to people all over the world at all different stations in life, and that is you're going to have heart flutters before you have meetings because you're going to stress out and all the rest of it, right? That's all going to happen, and there's a book. I tell you, there's a book called "The Obstacle Is the Way." It's Ryan Holiday, right? There is a truth to that, right? That if we avoid the obstacles in life, that we don't progress, and if we don't progress, we're not happy. Make progress, we're not happy. When we step into the obstacle, right, and when we take on a startup, that's exactly what you're doing. You're going to be putting challenges and obstacles in your way. That is going to be a great thing from a personal development point of view. And when we develop personally, that's when humans are happy, when we do that. So that's my combination of book recommendation and advice together.
Thanks, Peter, for that, super awesome advice. And, I started with this podcast just to give that essence of different perspectives on different topics by hosting insightful people and leaders like you from all across the globe. And today I feel that all that hard work has paid off because of exceptional people like yourself.
Oh, thanks.
Thanks a lot, Peter, for taking out the time to share your valuable experience and journey with us. I personally got to learn a lot from you today. And I'm sure a lot of our listeners would have got to learn a lot from today's episode as well. Thank you once again and wish you the best for Nutromics.
Yeah, thanks, Surya. And if anyone wants to reach out to me, any questions, you can find me on LinkedIn. Just look up Peter Vranes, Nutromics, or on our website, nutromics.com.au. Happy to answer any questions anyone might have.
Thank you so much.
No worries.